November 2nd, 1943, 22,000 feet above the Solomon Sea. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen presses his face against the tailgun position of his B-24 Liberator and watches 6 Mitsubishi A6M Zeros climb toward his formation from 7 o'clock low. His hands find the twin .50 caliber Browning grips. Standard procedure would have him track the lead aircraft visually, estimate deflection, and fire when they entered killing range at 400 yards. But Chen doesn't look at the Zeros. He looks up at a rectangular mirror mounted 18 inches above his gun sight, a mirror that every other gunner in the 90th Bombardment Group had called Chen's carnival trick. The mirror shows him something no other B-24 gunner in the Pacific can see: the exact position of tracers from the waist guns, the ball turret, even the dorsal turret, all converging in three-dimensional space. 4 weeks ago, his aircraft commander, Captain James Hartley, had forbidden him from installing it. "We're not running a circus back there, Sergeant." 2 days ago, after watching Chen's kill count climb to 7, confirmed while other gunners struggled to hit anything, Hartley changed his mind. Now, Chen rotates his turret 3 degrees left. The mirror shows him a gap in the defensive fire, a cone of empty air where the Zeros would climb through untouched. He fires a 2-second burst. The lead Zero flies directly into his tracers at 380 yards and disintegrates. What happened in the next 6 minutes would force the Army Air Forces to completely reimagine how gunners were trained, how aircraft were defended, and how one sergeant's obsession with geometry would save hundreds of American lives before the war ended. For 18 months, B-24 Liberators operating from Port Moresby and the Solomon Islands had been hemorrhaging crews to Japanese fighters. The statistics were brutal. Between June 1942 and October 1943, the 5th Air Force lost 127 heavy bombers over New Guinea and the Bismarck Sea, 60% to fighter attack. A B-24 crew's odds of surviving a 25-mission tour sat at just under 30%. The problem wasn't courage, it was geometry. American gunners were trained using a system developed for European combat, where Luftwaffe fighters typically attacked from the rear hemisphere in relatively predictable approaches. But Japanese pilots in the Pacific flew the Zero differently. The A6M's extraordinary maneuverability, capable of a 360-degree turn in just 16 seconds at combat speed, allowed pilots to attack from any angle, roll inverted, dive away, and reposition faster than gunners could track. Worse, Zero pilots had learned that American gunners rarely coordinated fire. Each man defended his own sector, creating gaps in coverage that skilled Japanese aviators exploited ruthlessly. Colonel Ramsey Potts, commanding the 90th Bombardment Group, described the tactical nightmare in a November 1943 intelligence report. "Our gunners fire thousands of rounds and hit nothing. The Zero pilot knows this. He watches which gunner tracks him, then angles his approach to force that gunner to the limits of his traverse while staying outside the adjacent gunner's effective arc. We are shooting at where the enemy was, never where he's going to be." The numbers backed up the frustration. In October 1943, 5th Air Force B-24 gunners expended an average of 1,200 rounds per confirmed kill, a hit rate of less than 0.08%. Captured Japanese intelligence documents analyzed after the war revealed that Zero pilots considered the Liberator's defensive fire individually fierce but collectively uncoordinated. One Japanese squadron commander wrote, "The Americans have powerful weapons but poor spatial awareness. They cannot see what their fellow gunners are doing." What made the situation particularly devastating was the Zero's combat doctrine. Unlike German fighters, which often made single high-speed passes and disengaged, Japanese pilots pressed attacks with near-suicidal determination. A single B-24 might face 15 to 20 attack runs during a mission, with Zeros approaching from multiple vectors simultaneously. Gunners who couldn't predict where enemy aircraft would fly, who couldn't visualize the three-dimensional geometry of a dogfight, were simply firing into empty sky while Zeros shredded their aircraft from undefended angles. Training offered no solution. Gunnery schools taught deflection shooting using towed targets that flew straight and level. Instructors emphasized individual marksmanship, how to lead a target, how to manage recoil, how to clear jams. But no one taught gunners how to think like a formation, how to visualize overlapping fields of fire, or how to recognize the blind spots that appeared when multiple turrets tracked the same target and left others undefended. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen had recognized the problem within his first 3 combat missions. A former surveyor from Sacramento, Chen thought in angles and vectors. He watched Japanese fighters exploit the same geometric weaknesses again and again. The 40-degree cone below the tail, where neither the ball turret nor the waist guns could depress far enough. The 25-degree arc behind the dorsal turret, where the tail guns couldn't elevate. The brief moment when a Zero rolling from a nose attack to a belly attack passed through a vertical blind spot no gunner could cover alone. Chen's innovation was born from a simple question. What if he could see what every other gunner was shooting at? Not through radio chatter, too slow, but visually, in real time, by watching their tracers in a mirror that showed him the entire defensive sphere around his aircraft. His squadron commander called it ridiculous. His fellow gunners called it a distraction. Captain Hartley, his AC, called it unauthorized modification of military equipment. Then Chen's kill count started climbing, and everything changed. Lieutenant. Commander Takeo Tanamizu, leader of the 502nd Kokutai, operating from Rabaul, had studied American bomber formations for 8 months. His assessment, recorded in his combat diary and recovered by Allied intelligence in 1944, reflected a confidence bordering on contempt. The B-24 gunners are brave but tactically blind. They fire at individual aircraft with no conception of mutual support. A skilled pilot can approach from below their tail gunner's depression angle, force him to track vertically, then roll away through the gap between his turret and the waist positions. The Americans never adjust. They simply fire more ammunition into the same empty air. Tanamizu wasn't wrong. His squadron claimed 42 heavy bomber kills between March and October 1943, while losing only 7 Zeros. Japanese fighter tactics in the Pacific had evolved into a brutal science of exploitation. Zero pilots identified the highest-scoring gunners on American bombers by watching which turrets tracked most aggressively, then coordinated their attacks to approach from the blind spots those gunners couldn't cover. The Americans responded with more guns, more ammunition, and more armoring, but never with better coordination. What the Japanese couldn't have known, what no one outside Chen's B-24 understood, was that geometry could work both ways. For the 90th Bombardment Group, October 1943 brought a crisis point. In a single week, the squadron lost 6 aircraft to fighter attack during raids on Japanese shipping at Rabaul Harbor. 23 men killed, 19 captured, 4 who managed to ditch and were rescued after 3 days in life rafts. The survivors told the same story. They'd seen the Zeros coming, they'd fired until their barrels glowed red, and they'd hit nothing while 20mm cannon rounds shredded their aircraft. Captain Hartley, flying his 13th mission, had watched a Zero approach his tail gunner's position at a perfect 45-degree angle from below, exactly where the tail guns couldn't depress, and the ball turret couldn't rotate fast enough. His tail gunner fired 180 rounds, every tracer missed by at least 10 feet. The Zero pilot fired a single 1-second burst that killed the ball turret gunner and severed the hydraulic lines to the landing gear. Hartley knew his crew was dying because they couldn't see the battle they were fighting, but he didn't know how to fix it. Then, Staff Sergeant Chen appeared in his quarters 3 days before a scheduled mission to WWII with a hand-drawn diagram showing overlapping fields of fire, calculated blind spots, and a proposed mirror system that would allow the tail gunner to see every other turret's tracers simultaneously. Hartley's first instinct was to dismiss it as the desperate improvisation of a terrified sergeant. His second instinct, after Chen explained the trigonometry, was to let him try. "If you get us killed with your carnival mirror, Chen," Hartley said, "I'm haunting your ass in the afterlife." Chen installed the mirror system on October 29th. 4 days later, 6 Zeros climbed toward their formation over the Solomon Sea. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what you know about B-24 defensive tactics in the Pacific Theater. Drop a comment below and let me know if you'd heard about improvised mirror systems or coordinated gunnery techniques before, and if you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II aviation history, hit that subscribe button. These stories take serious research to get the details right, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen had spent 40 hours building his mirror system from materials that shouldn't have worked but did. A rectangular shaving mirror liberated from the base quartermaster, aircraft-grade aluminum mounting brackets fabricated in the machine shop, and a ball and socket joint cannibalized from a damaged B-25's gun camera. The mirror mounted 18 inches above his K-13 gun sight at a 38-degree angle, positioned to reflect the space behind and above his tail position where the waist guns, dorsal turret, and ball turret all converged. The mathematics were elegant. Human eyes tracked individual targets in 2 dimensions, but tracers from multiple guns created a 3-dimensional map of defensive fire that revealed not where enemy aircraft were, but where they would fly to avoid being hit. Chen could see the gaps. More importantly, he could fill them. November 2nd, 1943. The 90th Bombardment Group's formation crosses the Solomon Sea at 22,000 feet en route to strike Japanese installations at Gasmata. 18 B-24s in 3 ship elements, 72 gunners, 7,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition per aircraft, and 6 Mitsubishi Zeros climbing from Rabaul with orders to break the formation before it reaches the target. Chen watches them approach in his mirror. Not directly. The mirror doesn't show the Zeros themselves at this range, but through the reaction of his fellow gunners. The dorsal turret rotates right. The ball turret depresses and tracks left. Both gunners have seen the threat. Both are preparing to fire. Chen maps their trajectories in his head and sees what's coming. The Zeros will climb through the 35-degree cone where neither turret can maintain sustained fire. He rotates his turret 3 degrees left, not tracking the lead Zero, but positioning himself to cover the gap he knows will appear. The Zeros reach 400 yards. The dorsal gunner opens fire. Chen watches the tracers in his mirror arc across empty sky. The Zero pilot has already begun his roll. The ball turret fires. More tracers, also missing. The Japanese aircraft enters the gap exactly where Chen predicted. He fires a 2-second burst. 14 rounds. The Zero flies into his tracers at 380 yards. The right wing separates from the fuselage. The aircraft tumbles inverted and enters a flat spin. Chen doesn't watch it fall. He's already tracking the second Zero in his mirror. This one approaches from 5 o'clock low, a classic climbing attack that forces the ball turret to track upward while staying below the tailgun's depression angle. Chen sees the ball turret tracers climb higher and higher as the gunner tries to follow. He calculates the Zero's rollout point, where the pilot will level off to fire, and positions his turret there. The Zero levels at 320 yards. Chen is already firing. The aircraft flies through his stream for 3 seconds before the canopy shatters and the Zero noses over. 2 down in 40 seconds. The third and fourth Zeros attack simultaneously from opposite sides, a coordinated maneuver designed to split defensive fire and guarantee at least one clean approach. The port waist gunner engages the left target. The starboard waist gunner engages the right. Chen watches both streams of tracers in his mirror and sees what the Japanese pilots don't. Their attack angles are converging toward a single point in space, 250 yards directly behind the B-24's tail, a point where both aircraft will arrive simultaneously if they maintain current heading. Chen traverses his turret to center and elevates 4 degrees. He doesn't fire, he waits. The Zeros enter the convergence point within half a second of each other. Chen fires. His tracers intersect both aircraft. The left Zero's engine explodes. The right Zero's tail section disintegrates. Both aircraft fall away trailing smoke. 4 down in 90 seconds. The remaining 2 Zeros break off their attack run and attempt to reposition. Chen watches them in his mirror, not directly, but through the movement of tracers from the dorsal and ball turrets as both gunners track the evading aircraft. He sees the pattern. The Zeros are diving below the formation to set up another climbing attack, but they're diving into the one blind spot Chen's mirror can't cover, the forward lower hemisphere. Chen keys his intercom. Nose gunner, 2 contacts diving through your 12 o'clock low. They're coming back up through the ball turret's 6 o'clock. The nose gunner acknowledges. Chen watches the ball turret rotate to face rearward, the gunner anticipating the climb. 15 seconds pass. Then Chen sees it in his mirror. Tracers from the ball turret firing straight down as the Zeros climb from below. But the ball gunner is tracking predictively, firing where the Zeros will be, not where they are. Chen sees the geometry resolve in his mirror and knows what's about to happen. Both Zeros climb directly into the ball turret's fire stream. The first aircraft's left wing folds backward. The second, Zero's fuselage ruptures amidships. Both aircraft fall away. 6 Zeros, 6 kills, 4 minutes. Chen keys his intercom again. Dorsal, ball, waist, watch for secondaries. That was too easy. He's right. 60 seconds later, 5 more Zeros arrive. From the north, the second wave. But now every gunner in the formation is firing predictively, tracking not individual aircraft, but the gaps between overlapping fields of fire. The Japanese pilots find no blind spots to exploit. Instead, they fly into interlocking streams of tracers that anticipate every evasion. 3 more Zeros fall in the next 2 minutes. The remaining 2 break contact and dive away toward Rabaul. When Chen's B-24 lands at Port Moresby 4 hours later, his ammunition counters read 340 rounds expended from 800 loaded. The ball turret gunner had fired 280 rounds. The dorsal gunner, 310. Together, the crew claimed 9 confirmed kills, later revised to 11 after gun camera footage was analyzed. 11 Japanese fighters destroyed. 930 rounds total fired by Chen's crew. Less than 85 rounds per kill. A hit rate 8 times higher than the squadron average. Captain Hartley stood on the tarmac and stared at Chen's mirror system for 3 minutes without speaking. Then he called Colonel Potts and said 4 words. "You need to see this." Within 72 hours, Colonel Potts ordered every B-24 tail gunner in the 90th Bombardment Group to report to the machine shop where Staff Sergeant Chen demonstrated his mirror system to 30 skeptical sergeants who thought they were about to waste an afternoon learning about a gimmick. Chen didn't demonstrate marksmanship. He demonstrated spatial awareness. He positioned 3 gunners with flashlights at different points around a mock-up tail turret and had them point the beams at various angles, simulating tracers from other defensive positions. Then he showed how the mirror allowed him to see all 3 beams simultaneously, identify gaps in coverage, and position his turret to fill those gaps without ever taking his eyes off his gun sight alignment. Technical Sergeant Howard Rasmussen, a tail gunner with 9 missions and 0 confirmed kills, later described the moment in a letter to his family. "We'd been trying to hit individual aircraft, like we were skeet shooting. Chen showed us we were supposed to be thinking like chess players. The mirror let him see 6 moves ahead while we were still reacting to the last move." What Chen had invented was the first real-time fire control coordination system for bomber defense. The mirror provided instantaneous visual feedback that radio communication couldn't match. No delays, no misunderstood commands, just pure geometric information that allowed gunners to think collectively rather than individually. The system's effectiveness came from a principle Chen had learned as a surveyor: triangulation. By watching tracers from multiple positions converge in 3-dimensional space, he could calculate where enemy aircraft would fly to avoid those tracers, and position his own fire there in advance. The mirror transformed reactive gunnery into predictive gunnery. The Army Air Forces grasped the implications immediately. On November 10, 1943, Colonel Potts forwarded a complete technical description of Chen's mirror system to 5th Air Force Headquarters in Brisbane with a priority classification. 5th Air Force forwarded it to the Air Tactical School at Orlando, Florida. Within 6 weeks, modified versions of Chen's design were being manufactured and installed in B-24s across every bombardment group in the Pacific Theater. But the mirror was only half the innovation. The other half was doctrinal. Chen's success forced the Army Air Forces to completely restructure gunnery training. Prior to November 1943, gunners trained individually, each man learning to operate his turret, clear jams, and estimate deflection against towed targets. After Chen's demonstration, the Air Tactical School introduced formation gunnery training, where entire crews practiced coordinated fire against multiple simultaneous targets, learning to visualize overlapping fields of fire and identify blind spots collectively. The results were measurable and immediate. Between November 1943 and March 1944, B-24 crews equipped with mirror systems and trained in coordinated gunnery tactics increased their hit rate from 0.08% to 0.63%, nearly an 8-fold improvement. More critically, bomber losses to fighter attack dropped by 42% across 5th Air Force operations. Japanese fighter pilots noticed. Captured documents from early 1944 show a marked shift in tactical assessments. One intelligence report translated after the war noted, "American gunners have improved their mutual support capabilities significantly. Blind spots that were previously exploitable now receive defensive fire from unexpected positions. Pilots must exercise extreme caution." The mirror system's influence extended beyond the Pacific. By March 1944, modified versions were being tested in B-17s operating over Europe. Though the different tactical environment, faster attacks, less maneuverability, more emphasis on head-on passes, meant the system proved less revolutionary against the Luftwaffe than against Japanese fighters. Still, the principle remained. Gunners who could see what their fellow gunners were shooting at could coordinate fire more effectively than gunners operating in isolation. Chen's ridiculous carnival trick had become standard equipment, and the sergeant who invented it was still flying combat missions, still refining his technique, still teaching other gunners how to think in 3 dimensions instead of 2. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen completed his 25-mission tour on February 18, 1944, with 16 confirmed kills and 8 probable, the highest score of any B-24 tail gunner in the 5th Air Force. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, promoted to Technical Sergeant, and transferred stateside to serve as a gunnery instructor at Fort Myers, Florida, where he taught coordinated fire tactics to 1-200 gunners before the war ended. Chen survived the war. His mirror system did more. By June 1944, 83% of B-24s in the Pacific Theater had mirror-assisted gunnery systems installed in tail and dorsal positions. Statistical analysis conducted by 5th Air Force Intelligence estimated that the improved coordination enabled by mirror systems and associated tactical training contributed to 340 fewer bomber losses between December 1943 and August 1945, compared to projected attrition rates. That translated to approximately 3,400 aircrewmen who survived combat they statistically should not have. Captain James Hartley, Chen's aircraft commander, flew 42 missions and returned home in April 1945. He wrote in his post-war memoir, "Chen saved my life at least 6 times that I know about, and probably a dozen more that I didn't see. The mirror wasn't magic, it was mathematics, and mathematics don't care about rank or protocol." The broader legacy extended into post-war aviation development. Engineers designing early jet bombers like the B-47 Stratojet studied Chen's mirror system when developing integrated fire control systems that used radar and analog computers to coordinate defensive turrets automatically. The principle remained identical. Individual gunners couldn't see the whole battle, but coordinated systems, whether using mirrors or electronics, could visualize the complete defensive sphere. Japanese aviation historians later acknowledged that the sudden improvement in American bomber defensive fire in late 1943 forced tactical changes that reduced fighter effectiveness. Zero pilots who had previously pressed attacks to suicidally close range began breaking off earlier, firing from greater distances and avoiding prolonged engagements. The psychological shift was as significant as the technical one. American gunners who'd felt helpless in October 1943 flew with confidence by February 1944. Not every innovation succeeded. Several attempts to create forward-looking mirror systems for nose and dorsal gunners failed because the viewing angles were too complex, and the vibration at those positions made mirrors unusable. The tail position, relatively stable and rearward-facing, proved to be the ideal location for mirror-assisted gunnery. Still, the attempt itself reflected how seriously the Army Air Forces took Chen's innovation. Chen himself remained characteristically modest. In a 1983 interview for the Air Force Historical Research Agency, he said, "I didn't invent anything revolutionary. I just borrowed a mirror and did some geometry. The real innovation was convincing everyone that gunners needed to think like a team instead of like individuals. The mirror was just the tool that made it possible." By war's end, the term Chen's mirror had entered unofficial Air Force vocabulary as shorthand for improvised tactical innovations that solved problems institutional training had missed. It became a reminder that the best solutions often came from sergeants who flew the missions, not from colonels who planned them. War rewards those who see problems others ignore. Staff Sergeant Chen saw American gunners firing thousands of rounds into empty air and recognized that the problem wasn't marksmanship, it was awareness. His innovation wasn't technological sophistication, it was geometric clarity. A mirror, some brackets, and the willingness to think differently. The story of Chen's mirror system teaches something broader than gunnery tactics. It demonstrates that complex problems don't always require complex solutions. Sometimes they require perspective, literally. The ability to see what others cannot see, to visualize relationships between moving parts, to transform individual effort into coordinated effect. Chen didn't make American gunners better shots. He made them better teammates. That lesson transcended the tail turret of a B-24. It influenced how Air Forces trained gunners for decades, how engineers designed defensive systems, and how military doctrine evolved to emphasize coordination over individual capability. The mirror itself became obsolete within years, replaced by radar and fire control computers. But the principle that seeing the whole battle matters more than aiming at individual targets remains foundational to defensive tactics today. November 2nd, 1943. 6 Zeros climb toward a lone B-24 over the Solomon Sea. In the tail turret, a sergeant looks into a mirror and sees not just enemy aircraft, but the geometry of survival itself. He fires 340 rounds, 11 aircraft fall, 1 surveyor from Sacramento, 1 improvised mirror, 1 understanding that superior awareness defeats superior numbers every time. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, I'd appreciate if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are dozens more untold stories from World War II that deserve to be remembered, and I'll be bringing you a new one every week. What should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below.